All
right. It's always hard because I'm never sure when YouTube actually starts. So it sometimes starts before. All right. Well, there we go. Welcome everyone to the Rabbi Interviews. Sorry again if we always start like a bit late. It's hard to tell when we adjust for YouTube and so forth. We are very privileged to have another wonderful person here to interview today. I want to welcome Zoe Rinker, who is currently the Executive Director of the Savannah Tree Foundation. Obviously, this week is Tu B'Shvat, and so it's a pleasure to have her here during what we call the Jewish Arbor Day week. A little bit about Zoe. She is a Savannian, although she moved here when she was 4. She graduated from Jenkins High School, went to a school called Yale University. I have not heard of it, as I was telling her, but she said it is not in Georgia, so probably most of us haven't heard of it. She then moved to the DC area and had several jobs after she graduated, including, let's go to those wonderful things, very impressive ones. She was the director of research at Recity and the research manager. She worked for the city of Baltimore as a demolition operations manager and a special assistant to the deputy commissioner. She was a fellow in the office of the CEO. She worked for the program support associate, and she was a primary researcher and co-author for the United Nations Foundations, which sounds very exciting. Love to hear it. She's written for Women's Economic Empowerment in Agriculture, an article supporting women farmers, which is really fantastic. Again, she moved down here to be closer to her family, and she is fortunate to have found this wonderful organization. So she was very smart. She was planning to move to Savannah and then found the perfect job. And she is here because her and her husband are going to be raising their family as she is due this summer. And we're very excited to have her here. This is Lori, who I have not introduced you to yet.
I've known each other forever.
Oh, good. So most people watch on YouTube either now or later. We usually have 2 to 3 folk who like to come in and ask questions. So the first thing we're going to say is a little bit about you and what got you interested in the field you're in now.
Sure. So you covered a lot of the bases, but yes, I grew up here, grew up on Long Island. Didn't realize that where I grew up was so different until I moved away. And I realized that not everyone had the street trees we do. Not everybody has the access to, environmental and natural areas like we do here in Savannah. So, that's kind of one of the classic cases of you don't know what you have until it's gone. So that's kind of was something that drove us to move back as well as, being close to family as well, as we start to raise our family. But so my background is mostly urban planning and community development. That's kind of my long and storied career of 15 years. That's kind of the thread that ties all these jobs together. And so as I was moving back to Savannah, I knew I wanted to do something that contributed to the community, that had to really give back to the place that raised me. And this position came up, and they had just brought on a arborist to be the subject matter expert. And so they were looking for someone who could manage the administration and kind of the vision of the organization. And, I came out with trees are an integral part of community. They're an integral part of what makes Savannah, Savannah, and they should be available to be enjoyed by everyone in Savannah, not just tourists and people who live downtown. So I kind of had this idea that I bring to the organization, which is more about environmental justice and trees as a tool for economic and public health empowerment. And so the board liked that direction, and I've been here since July 2019, and we rebranded at Savannah Tree Foundation. We have the first new logo in 35 years. We've moved a lot online, especially with COVID. We just did the numbers, almost 60 hours of online content in the last year to try and reach different parts of the community who may not have known who we were before. Because we're a 39-year-old organization. We've been around since 1982, but we've also been moving in kind of the similar, smaller circles since then. So my goal is really to make sure everyone in Savannah knows about us and knows the importance of trees in the community development world, and how it kind of crosses all the different issues that we face, from safety to economic development to public health. So it's been an exciting year and a half. Happy to be here, happy to be back in the land of sunshine, especially this week where all my friends are dealing with the snow. And yeah, I've learned a ton. I mean, so trees are not my background, but a year and a half in, our arborist has the patience of a saint and has really just taken a lot of time to teach me about all the local trees. And I like to think I'm pretty good on tree questions these days. So if you have any of those, I will do my best to answer. And anything I don't know, I will write down and ask our arborist. So.
Well, I think it's very important for organizations these days. They were very smart. Certainly, there's a lot of people who are professional when it comes to knowing about trees and how to treat them. But when you're running an organization, you often need somebody who can run an organization. And so that's the direction they seem to have gone, which I very much support. Obviously, we have a wonderful person now in place. What when you went north, what were the differences you saw when you lived in DC and then whatever the college town where Yale was at?
I mean, it's just so they're both very urban, right? I mean, I lived in New York, New Haven, DC, and Baltimore. And it's just a different hustle level. Not that people here aren't hustling, and there's amazing stuff happening on the tech and innovation side here in Savannah, but just the pace of life, I know it's like very cliched, but it's true. The flip side is that you're also exposed to a lot of different people and forces, and I wouldn't trade my time up there for anything. But weather-wise, pace of life-wise, now that we're settling into the next phase of life, this is definitely, Savannah was the perfect kind of intersection of the metropolitan and the slower southern pace of life. And, we're very happy to have made the move.
Yeah, we feel the same way. We moved here, and again, it's a smaller city, but it's got a lot of stuff, amenities, however you want to describe it.
Yeah,
So,
very globally minded.
Yes. Plus, we got the tourism, which means we have a lot of good restaurants, and hopefully we'll go back to them pretty soon. Yeah. Although I like eating, and we're lucky because we can't eat outside in a lot of these places. We're up north. I would imagine they're a lot more restricted when it comes to that. So you moved back to Savannah, you lived here for a while, and then you found this wonderful opportunity. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of this organization?
Sure. So it's actually the oldest urban forestry organization in Georgia. It beat Trees Atlanta by 2 years, I think. So it was officially established in 1982 by 3 women who all lived in Vernonburg. So it was Paige Hungerpiller, Linda Beam, and Susie Williams. And they used to meet every Monday morning after they dropped their kids off at school, and they called themselves the Monday Morning Mothers of the Earth. And they would talk about all the environmental problems that they saw around them. And so at this point, the specific problem they were trying to organize around was they were going to widen White Bluff between Durant and Abercorn and take out all of those historic live oaks in the median there. And they didn't want to see that. So they kind of, in the true Savannah way, used of the 80s, they used their husbands' connections, they used their connections, and got that project stopped. And then that's why so they expanded outwards instead of into the median. And that's why we have those historic live oaks now on White Bluff. And so they realized after that effort that they should probably formalize. And so they started Savannah Tree Foundation. The next big project was the Candler Oak, which is down on Creighton across from Forsyth Park. It's now next to the SCAD building, Ruskin Hall. And so that was a tree that is estimated to be over 300 years old. It predates the founding of Savannah itself. And at the time, it had asphalt all the way up to the base of the tree. Cars were parking up to the trunk, and the tree was starting to fail. And so they worked with the law firm that was there at the time to secure the first it's the first and only conservation easement for a single tree in the entire country. And so now to this day, we have control over the Candler Oak easement. We do events out there. We are in charge of its care, and we've extended its life by at least 25, 30 years at this point. So that's kind of their second major milestone. And then they just realized that the tree ordinances needed strengthening as things started to develop in Savannah. We needed to make sure that we had a good count on how many trees we had. So they actually did one of the first satellite canopy assessments in the country in the 90s. And so, you know, they just been quietly behind the scenes shaping a lot of tree policy here over the last 38 years. And then we didn't get our first staff member until 2002, I think. And so for many, many years, it was solely board driven. And so now, since the early 2000s, they've been trying to rethink the longevity as the original board members kind of made it to their retirement years. So they started bringing on staff, and now we're coming up on our 40th anniversary next year. And that's we're using this as an inflection point to think about, okay, what do the next 40 years look like? How do we deal with, you know, suburbanization out in West Chatham? How do we deal with an aging tree canopy downtown? How do we deal with the inequality in our tree canopy across Chatham County? So kind of thinking about these next level issues on how to protect the urban forest we have and grow it for future generations.
Well, that's a lot going on here. As
Yeah.
you know, we're a growing city, so obviously there are going to be some issues. Lori and Larry, if you have any questions, please just chime in anytime. So you're talking about changing the direction of what this organization is going to be doing for the next 40 years. So what are the changes you think are going to happen? What are you going to continue doing?
Yeah, I think we've planted over 4,000 trees since our inception, which is great, given that we plant 15-gallon up trees, so it's not like we're planting seedlings, we're planting larger trees that have a better chance of establishment. But I think that volume can go up. I think it has to go up in especially the suburban areas of Chatham County. It's interesting, we are the Savannah Tree Foundation, and for a long time, most of our policy work was focused on downtown Savannah. But to be honest, downtown Savannah has a very strong Parks and Rec, or they're not Park and Tree anymore, Greenscapes department. You know, there's money for the trees downtown. And while we can help influence some of that policy, we need to be putting our main resources on places that maybe don't have money for trees. So we've started a program where we plant in every municipality of Chatham County for Georgia Arbor Day. So Georgia Arbor Day is actually in February. And so, you know, National Arbor Day is in April, but Georgia Arbor Day is earlier because we can't plant when it gets hot here. So we'll be planting 100 trees across the county next month, across each municipality. So, you know, working with Bloomingdale, Port Wentworth, they don't necessarily have the tree departments that the city does, but helping them understand what are the right trees to plant in the right places for them, and how can they encourage planting on private land as well. So that's another thing we're really focused on that we haven't in the past, is how can we encourage planting trees on private land? Because there's only so much that public land can cover when you look at the entirety of Chatham County. That's from, you know, individuals who have cut down trees after hurricanes, to just long-term development where they come in and clear cut and then just, you know, plant the minimum to meet their tree points. So how can we be a resource for that like arm of work as well? So we've been doing a lot of tree giveaways, tree sales. We're doing a seedling giveaway on Saturday at the Forsyth Farmers Market. So really just upping the volume of trees that we get into the community beyond the more official tree plantings that we do. So those are kind of that. And then the big question that, you know, none of us really know how to handle right now is climate change and how it's affecting the coast, and the role trees will play in that, both from being affected by rising sea levels and the saltwater intrusion into our coastlines is killing a lot of our pine trees, especially on the coast. How do we combat that? How do we plant the right trees to be able to deal with these rising sea levels? But then how can we use trees to, you know, part of rising sea levels is actually the freshwater backup as well. So it's not just the salt water, it's how can we use trees for stormwater management, and really to create some long lasting, really resilient green infrastructure to help us deal with the long-term effects of climate change. So that's a big goal, long-term goal. I don't have the answers for that right now, but we're trying to work with people around the city and the county. Yeah, Larry?
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Thank you, Zoe.
Sure.
You mentioned earlier the word branding, and I was curious as to what do you mean by it's a word that's been bandied about quite a bit now. And what is your concept of branding, and why is branding important now?
Sure. So I think Savannah Tree Foundation was a very constant brand for many, many years. We'd had the same logo. The logo we had is older than anyone who currently works at Savannah Tree Foundation. And so, I came in and was like, if we're going to be reaching people beyond those we've reached in the past, we need to come and look a little bit more forward thinking. So our old logo was a live oak tree. The live oak tree is a logo for many things here in Savannah, everything from the libraries to the schools, So I was like, we need to set ourselves apart because there are a lot of people who hadn't heard of Savannah Tree Foundation despite our, time in the community. So I really focused on creating a logo, started with the logo that was very clean and modern and forward thinking. And then from there, we built an entire social media presence and a website that is reflective of that kind of more forward thinking. So for me, it's a representation to the community that it's not just the same old at Savannah Tree Foundation anymore, and that we're really thinking more and less about our legacy and more about what we're going to be contributing come the future. So it's for us, it's been a whole kind of package of, what is our logo? What is our what material are we putting out? It's all now kind of streamlined. What communications are we putting out and where? And just making sure that we're approachable by everybody and not just feeling like you have to be someone in the know to come to Savannah Tree Foundation.
Another
I got a question for you, Zoe.
Oh.
Larry, did you want something else before I?
No, go on. That's fine.
Have you partnered with any private organizations to plant trees as a fundraising for both that organization and yours together?
So we have in the past, not since I've been here. The main planting programs we've taken on since I've been here were Cool Schools, which was last year, which was we planted across 8 different schools in Chatham County, really trying to focus on the educational aspect as well. And then this year we're doing mostly the Georgia Arbor Day Plant It Forward campaign because it was very difficult to find planting sites with COVID and people who'd be willing to partner with us to host plantings, because it is actually, that's our most difficult thing these days, is to find places to plant because we do not own any property. So we either need to work with a municipality, another nonprofit, a private entity who wants, to create a space for us to plant. So, now we're working with Gulfstream's really interested in offsetting their carbon footprint through tree planting. So we had a couple irons in the fire there before COVID kind of threw everything out last year. And then they are actually sponsoring our February Plant It Forward campaign for Georgia Arbor Day.
The reason I'm asking is I don't know if you are aware, but one of the things that a lot of Jewish organizations do is plant a tree in Israel in someone's memory or when, in honor of someone. And maybe partnering, whether it's something that we could do at our synagogue or other places, it would be wonderful to bring that home in addition to planting a tree in Israel is, through the Savannah Tree, you could plant a tree here.
Yeah.
And donate to both organizations in your donation to do that. What do you think, Rabbi? Is that something that
That's a great idea.
That is a great idea.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll work with you on it, Zoe.
All right, Lori, I'll email you. Yeah.
We could do it for Georgia Arbor Day, or we could do it next year for Tu B'Shvat.
Well, I think Tu B'Shvat would be more appropriate, if you partner with a religious organization, and that would give us time to do something. But that would be, I'd love to plant a tree in honor of my husband, and and just something here rather than just sending it to another country. And the donation could be shared, and then we could be the pilot program, and then it could be expanded to other synagogues or other churches or other, private sector, things like that.
Yeah.
Even if they didn't have the land itself, but you could say you could put it on your own land.
Yeah.
But it would be still part of your donation or whatever.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
like that idea because we have a lot of people who do want to give like in memoriam, right?
Mhm.
But they're like, can we sponsor a tree that we can then go to? And I'm like, well, we just
Exactly.
don't have that current capacity given our resources at the moment. We just don't have a place to put those trees. But if we can partner with organizations that have the space, I think that would be a great solution.
well, Rabbi, if you think that's something that we could
I
put
think
on
it
the,
could be, yeah, I think for next year, hopefully, God willing, we can have a little, an activity where we can bring people together.
Yeah.
I'm very hesitant to do big activities with, I even
well,
have,
it wouldn't necessarily even have to be a big activity together. It could be just something in how it's promoted that you could do separately. So Zoe, think about it and
Yeah,
you know where to
I'll give you
find
a call.
a great thing for family. Yeah, we're going to do something tomorrow. My wife is doing a tree planting. Larry.
Yeah, I had a couple of other thoughts.
Sure.
One was, we live in South Carolina, over in Sun City here. We have a very active bird club, which I'm not very conversant in, but I like to look at the birds. And one of the big things that they've been doing is encouraging people not to cut down some of their trees that are invading the front lawn and invading the, the roots of the driveway, get underneath the driveways and things like this, by appealing to them to say that these are really sanctuary for birds. And in particular, I guess the live oak is one of the major trees that birds like. So I was just thinking that if you want to appeal to people who are, in private, instead of public lands, to their sense of bird watching, and maybe through the Audubon Society or something, that may be an appeal point to another joint venture, so to speak.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We were working with the Skidaway Audubon on that as well. They're having a lot of people in the landings clear cut trees, especially after hurricanes, which is a whole issue that we have to deal with on the education of if you have well-maintained trees that you haven't kind of hacked out recently. Most trees are not going to come down during major weather if you're, and if they do, there's ways to mitigate those issues. So that's something we're working on too, and creating materials so that people aren't afraid of all of their trees and, chop them all down.
And another question for you was, we've seen in many communities, they are awarded the status of what's called Tree City USA. What is that all about? And do you apply for that? And is that worthwhile thinking about?
So Savannah, Thunderbolt, Tybee, and I think Bloomingdale are all Tree City USA organizations. I actually think Cooler, but I don't know how they maintain that. But it's an organization. It's run by. We're not necessarily associated with it, but right in Georgia, it's run by the Georgia Forestry Commission, and we do partner with them, to help do programming in each of these cities. But what it means is that you have a tree ordinance that the commission finds sufficient enough to protect trees. You do something for Georgia Arbor Day, like you plant trees for Georgia Arbor Day, and you maintain a certain level of canopy, I think. And you maintain a tree commission, so a group of citizens that advises the municipality on tree policy. So it's more of a feel-good kind of marketing thing, but I think I think at least half of the municipalities in Chatham are tree cities, quote unquote, or tree communities. That said, it's I think a little harder to manage what that actually means, because it means Tree City Savannah is very different regulation than what like Tybee would need to do to be a tree city, just from the sizes. But it's a good kind of marker, and it's a good indicator for us of which municipalities are willing to have us butt into their business about tree ordinances and kind of figure out how we can improve what they have on the books already.
Another question on some of the, in addition to live oaks, which are, so prominent, what about magnolias and azaleas and all of the other, are you involved in, is that part of the trees as well? The
so we're
parks and the so-called, squares?
Yes, so we are actually, we focus on the entire urban forest, which includes both the trees and the ecosystems they support. So that includes, things like wax myrtle and azaleas and all the stuff that kind of grows underneath the trees. Our big push, actually, this is another kind of way that we've done a little bit of breaking from the past in the last year and a half, is that we are encouraging much more diverse plantings. As much as we love the live oak and want to protect the live oaks and continue that, we can't just plant live oaks. It makes us really susceptible to pests and disease. It really, doesn't contribute to as a diverse of a wildlife habitat as we need. So we've been trying to really push alternative species that we can be planting, maybe not downtown where, we have our iconic live oaks, but for people who are planting on private property or in other areas, what are trees that can do well in what we think will be changing climates. Like, for example, a lot of people who move down here and retire down here love dogwoods, and they want to plant dogwoods in their yard. Dogwoods die very quickly here. Yeah, I can see that you guys have had some experience there.
We didn't do well with them in New Jersey either.
Yeah. And it's actually in recent years, you can see it getting worse because our summers are getting hotter. And they just can't deal unless they're shaded by another tree. They really just can't. Even I have one in my backyard. I have a ton of trees in my backyard, and it still just can't make it through the summers. So finding things that, like, the dogwood has beautiful flowers. So what other type of tree can we plant that will replicate that? You have redbuds, which are native to the area. You have tulip poplars, which create these really gorgeous yellow flowers. So just finding trees that meet some of the kind of ideas of what people are like. People like mimosa trees, but those are super invasive and can really mess with our ecosystem here. And so finding alternatives to those and alternatives to live oaks. So some other types of oaks, red oaks, magnolias, we do support, and just a lot of different diversity. So that should something happen, like right now, all of the sugarberry trees in Ardsley and beyond are dying off for a reason people can't figure out. They've been studying it for, for 10 years now across Georgia. And in the Southeast, we've had a major, it's like a combination of pest and disease, I think. And so you're going to see in Ardsley, for example, a lot of sugarberries coming out because they planted those all at the same time because they were fast growing and wanted to create a sense of place. But now you're going to have whole sections of like whole streets on Ardsley that have no trees. So we're trying to figure out when we're planting, we want to make sure that we're planting things that are diverse and can withstand some of what we know are going to be more dramatic kind of swings in temperature and disease in the coming years. Because being a port city, we are actually an entry point for a lot of pests and disease here. Charleston and Savannah just had the first spotting of the Asian longhorn beetle in the South, which is and that decimated New York forests in the last 5 years. So
invasive species of plants that are coming in, like, you see along the, the sides of the roads, that kudzu,
kudzu, we have Chinese tallow trees, it's all kind of part of the globalization. And so trying to figure out, we're trying to do a lot of education on, don't plant wisteria, no matter how pretty it is, because it's actually super invasive. Instead, you can plant, types of jasmine that are more localized here. And so that's where we really lean on some of our partners like Coastal Wildscapes and a lot of the garden clubs to help us kind of spread that message and work towards how we can combat some of the invasives that are getting planted.
Does Savannah have a botanical garden?
We do. It's on Eisenhower. It's the Coastal Botanical Garden. Did I get that right? I think.
I don't remember the name.
It's next to hospice. That's what
there's another one, but it may be outside the city limits. You go on, I think it's off 95, maybe.
Yeah, there's the bamboo farm. That's also the botanical garden. I think it's the Georgia Southern, maybe. But yeah, we have a couple of botanical gardens, and we have 1,000,001 gardening clubs.
A lot of gardening clubs in the city.
I was going to say on Hilton Head Island, we took it through part of Ollie at the University of South Carolina. They run a tour of what they call historic trees on Hilton Head Island. And they take you around on a bus and they stop at each one of the trees and they kind of give you an indication of what, it's hard to date the tree precisely, a live tree, but they give you an idea of when that tree was, what the historical events were at that tree. And it's kind of an interesting tour that that you might check with them.
Yeah, we're actually thinking about putting together an app that people can download and then Those who come to visit, if we can work with the hotels to have them kind of say like, here's something if you want some extra information as you walk around. That said, we are a staff of 2.5 people.
Oh, wow.
So
We're going to be my next question.
Yeah. So we have 2 full-time and 2 quarter-time people. And it's a lot. We all work I probably will work every day in February. But if we're doing what we can with what we have. And the idea is if we can we had a couple of lost years as an organization. We were just between leadership and a lot of transitions. Once we can right the ship there, which we're well on our way to doing, my goal is to start growing our staff, because I think for a lot of the ideas that we have as an organization, we can't really even begin to scratch the surface without more man hours.
Staff doesn't include the maintenance people that might cut down tree limbs, or do you contract everything out?
So the city does most of that work.
Oh, okay.
We don't really do any work beyond what we plant. So we maintain everything everything that we plant we'll maintain for 2 years, and then it gets moved to either the municipality that is planted on or to the entity that it's planted on. And then they are in charge of maintenance after that.
I see.
Yeah.
How many volunteers do you have, and what are some of the things volunteers do for you?
Yeah, so it depends on the years. We usually have between 300 and 500 volunteers a year.
Oh.
Just at various events. So the main things at this point are tree plantings, and then we do have maintenance days. We're trying to do a lot more focus on maintaining the trees that we plant for those first 2 years, because that's the crucial time. You have to make sure they're watered. You have to make sure that they're pruned properly so that they grow correctly and really are best suited for the long term. So we've been doing a lot of training before COVID, and kind of back when we had a monthly event called Forest Keepers that kind of taught how to prune, how to mulch. We just invested in a truck with a watering component, so we have a whole tank, a watering tank and pump, so that we can now go and actually do a lot of that. Really opens up where we can plant, because we don't have to be near water, like a fire hydrant or any type of water source. So we have mostly maintenance and work days, and then planting events are the 2 main things. And then, we also have we've tried to do a lot of family-friendly events in recent, especially since I've been here. Our board is very young. So we've had, my baby will be the 7th baby born in a year or 2.
Wow.
Our board members. So
We may
really
know
to get,
some of
yeah, they're just very young, and we all have apparently had babies at the same time. So they can all grow up together. But
Trees.
yeah, but so we try to do a lot of family type stuff so that everybody can bring their families and really have it, getting kids to enjoy and to really find passion in trees and in nature is important to us as well. So
you go into school, or before this, well, maybe virtually now, go into the schools and that type of jazz?
Yeah, so we've definitely gone to schools. I want to continue the Cool Schools program we started last year, and try to maybe come up with a longer term, more than just one-off, like a long-term program of how we can, work with. I think 3rd and 7th are the 2 kind of years grades that deal most specifically with trees in their curriculum.
Oh, okay.
So how we can become a part of that and really work, especially in the Title I schools who may not have access to that type of education, and really hands-on experience, because you can plant seedlings all day long. So
what are you most proud of during the, sorry, was that Larry?
I was just going, have you tried to integrate any sculpture into any of the areas where trees would be planted in the way that, I wouldn't say, Brook Green Gardens would do, or some of the famous sculpture gardens, but to invite sculptors in and put some kind of works there? I know down at the riverfront there are sculptures, but there are no trees around it. It's kind of like standalone kind of thing.
Well, I mean, that would be great. The problem always comes back to the fact that we don't own any of the land we plant on.
Oh, with SCAD.
Yeah. With SCAD?
Yeah.
SCAD is their partner. They, we've been working, because they now own the site that we have the conservation easement on. We've been definitely building a stronger relationship with SCAD, but I think there's a lot of bridges to cross there.
Okay.
Yeah.
You'll do it.
Yeah.
So
Maybe a couple of years.
for the programs for people who volunteer, are they mostly hands-on where you get groups to plant trees, or do they do other work for you, research, development, purchasing?
Yeah, so we have mostly hands-on tree planting. We've done a lot of educational programming since online, from more of a learning standpoint. So we have a monthly series called Tree Talks that's been going on since the beginning of COVID. We've been bringing in experts from across the community to talk about different issues related to our urban forest. February, it's the second Tuesday in every month. We have one of our board members talking about bonsaiing and teaching you how to start a bonsai tree.
Oh, cool.
But it's been everything from like that to, we had someone talk about urban wood reclamation and what we can be doing with stormfall and deconstructed wood out of the buildings that are coming down. We had someone talk about invasive species and what we can do to replace those types of things in your gardening. So it's been they're all on YouTube if anybody wants to go check them out. We have our own YouTube channel, and all of those have been uploaded. And we've really focused on education in this time where we can't gather, because so much, while our events are outside, we still tried to limit them to 15 to 20 people. We're masked, all of that. So really just trying to keep the conversation going online while we can't be together in person.
Very good. Lori, Jane, or Larry, any other questions before we continue? All right. So,
Sorry about that.
So Zoe, you've been here a year and a half. Why don't you talk a little bit about the struggles you've had? We mentioned earlier that you started in January of this year, and we all know what came up less than 2 months later.
Yeah, so I started in July of 2019.
July 2019, okay.
And it was actually 3 months before our annual fundraiser. So that was an exciting event to try and just onboard, figure out who all of our sponsors were, because I hadn't been home in 12 years.
Right.
And jump on board. So we finally kind of ramped up to that. But yeah, as you were talking about, it's as soon as I felt like I finally gotten, the right footing underneath me, we had gotten through Georgia Arbor Day, all of that last year. Of course, COVID hit, and it was difficult. The good news is that before I came, we really weren't a technologically advanced organization. We had a server in-house. We had a fire in March of 2019 that took us out for almost 6 months. We didn't have office space, and a lot of our files were inaccessible because they were on a server that got damaged. So luckily that set us up where I was like, okay, the first thing we're going to do is go onto the cloud, set up things that we can work remotely, figure out the technology we need to be able to withstand another event like that. So luckily, when the COVID had hit, we were all set up to really be flexible and pivot pretty quickly. So that was nice to be able to.
Yeah, of course, that's awesome.
And then, I think as all nonprofits in the recent year or so, fundraising has been difficult. For as much as we push the idea that trees are really integrated into everything, including public health. That's not where grants are really focused these days.
Right.
Our major donors really came through this year. We had some really wonderful support from our community, but it's still going to continue to be, a struggle, as we understand there are very pressing issues around students and them not having the support they need, not being in school. So we understand, but it's also just made some of the traditional grant pathways and funding resources that we've had have been cut off. So having to rethink that and really, go after new avenues has been interesting, especially for someone who is just relearning all of the landscape of Savannah.
That must be a very different city after 15 years being away or so.
Yes, and it's hard because half of the people remember me from when I was 16. Half people are, new, yeah, like Lori. So it's just been,
And earlier.
yep, an interesting, trying to create a new kind of identity for myself as an adult and a professional in the area, and then also relearn, places that I just didn't understand as a teen and as a kid. So
I know
You
you and
worked a lot with
days.
Jan Vanderbalk, haven't you? Who's a member of our temple. You've worked a lot with Jan, haven't you? Jan
I have,
Vanderbalk
yeah.
was a member of our temple.
yeah, they're great.
Mhm.
I'm sure I thought it was the bachelors who did a lot with you, but I think it may be somebody else.
Mhm.
Our
Jan and Charlie, Rabbi.
I mean, and I'm talking about a younger one with kids that were also very big with Swedish Tree Foundation, because one of the bar mitzvah projects we had, as I mentioned, through the years was for that. But let's go to Larry. He has a couple more questions and then we'll conclude.
Just a little bit of a historical question, which you may or may not know. When Oglethorpe originally set up the town, or whoever did some of the planning with him, did they have a real concept for the trees and the squares and what it would look like? And was that part of their plan, or was it pretty much, the proprietorship around the squares and, the alleyways and, what we've heard about, in the planning?
So actually, I have a lot of information on this because this is the urban planning is my true passion and background. So actually, the forest that we have now is technically the third urban forest of Savannah. The first would have been the longleaf pine forest that was here when they arrived. That was more or less clear cut for the downtown Savannah. And at that time, there were not a ton of trees that were planted. It was mostly open space so that they could have community gathering space and room for animals and kind of all of that. So, a lot of the depictions of early Savannah is pretty much clear cut in all the squares. So we cut down all of the longleaf more or less. And then, but then kind of towards the late 1700s, early 1800s, this movement came to make Savannah the forest city, quote unquote. And that's when they planted a lot of the China berries and sugar berries. And that was actually how we got the forest city as our moniker back in that time, was through that forest that was planted and really, nurtured through the early 18 to mid 1800s. Fun fact, at this point, Forsyth Park was a longleaf pine forest back in the day, before it was then the southern part was clear cut for staging grounds, for military staging grounds. And so that's a whole other fascinating project that's happening.
I work with that group. That's not your.
Yeah. And then in the late 1890s, there were a series of hurricanes, the worst of which was in 1893, that took out thousands of trees downtown, including a lot in Forsyth. And that was, in response to that, the Park and Tree Commission was formed to replant and really shape the forest that we know today. And that's when live oaks were planted a lot, because they knew that they could withstand a lot of the hurricane forces. And they really just started trying, as the evolution of the city evolved, they wanted to be kind of more sophisticated and wanted to have really curate this idea of what we now know as Savannah. So this is our third forest. What we plant now is really we're considering our fourth forest. And that's kind of as we, especially downtown, try to think about what's next, and try to combat, you're starting to see a lot of live oaks just at the end of their lifespan, because live oaks in the urban area live to be about 150 years. Thinking that they were planted in like the late 1890s, you're starting to come up on some of their lifetimes. Right. So as we think about, how can we be planting the next generation of trees even before these live oaks start to fail, you're going to have to be planting something else that can grow under the shade of a live oak. Live oaks can't grow under live oaks. It's just they need too much sun at the beginning of their life. So can we plant things like tulip poplars or tubelos that can do well in the shade and provide these really great canopies once they're given the space? What does that look like, and how do we maintain the essence of Savannah, which is so connected to live oaks, but also make it so it's not like one day, all these were planted within 5 years. We don't want all the trees to go away within 5 years.
And we saw what happened during the hurricane. Almost almost all the
Exactly.
damage was knocked down trees, and almost none of them, I don't think any trees fell down during the second hurricane a year later, so.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we lost a lot of water oaks during the first hurricane, which are related to the live oak in that they do not, they're evergreen oaks, but their root systems just aren't as strong as live oaks, and they're notorious for failing during storms.
Piece of history for you. There's only one country in the world today that has more trees now than in the year 1900. And that is Israel.
Okay, Israel.
Israel's the only one.
That's interesting.
They had no trees in the whole country. It was decimated in the first century and second century CE, and through the years, the 19th century and then really the 20th century, Jews around the world have sent money to plant trees there. So we're going to conclude here, but before we do, what are some ways we can participate and donate? I mean, I know you said you had something coming up soon. Are people allowed to participate in that because it's outdoors, or
Yeah,
you're
so
just doing it?
we're coming up on probably our busiest time since COVID started. So we're kicking off, our tree planting season only lasts through mid-March now. And so we're really trying to fit a lot into the next 6 weeks. Our first event is this Saturday. We're doing a seedling giveaway. So if you want, we're giving away swamp chestnut oak, which is a big shade tree, and red buds, which is a decorative tree. So either of those, if you want to plant on your property and kind of contribute to growth on private property, that's a great way to do it. Seedlings are very little work. And then we have a series of plantings across the county, the Plant It Forward series that starts mid-February. So we'll be getting dates and times of those up on our website. We're actually have a new website launching at the end of this week, which is Savannah. It'll be savannahtree.org. We're currently savannahtree.com. Either one will get you there. And we'll post all of those events on that and our Facebook page. Really, online right now, social media is the best way to figure out what we're up to on a day-to-day basis. But we'll be looking for volunteers to help with those plantings as well. We will be limiting them to about 20, so we'll have signups. But that's a great way if you want to kind of get involved, is look for the one that's in your municipality and come and help us plant tomorrow's tree canopy.
And that might be great. So if you would mind sending, putting us on our mailing list, on what they add my email I sent you, that'd be great.
Yep, I will definitely do that.
And it's really been an honor and a pleasure. I just happened to see her coincidentally talking to mutual friend Tom Kohler, which I think everyone in the city knows.
Everyone's mutual friend.
Yes. And I said, wait a minute, this is the person I wanted to call. So it was perfect timing. So thank you so much. We appreciate it. This will continue to be on YouTube, our YouTube page, and anything you need from her, SavannahTreeFoundation.org or .com will get you there as well.
Yep.
.com. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much again.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
Oh yeah, we really appreciate it. If you need anything from me or us, you just let us know anytime.
Great. Same here.
All right, everyone, stay safe, everybody.
All right. Have a good
We'll see you
day.
next
All right. Y'all have a good day.